Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here. This is a very random and special episode because joining me on the show to answer your Vikings question is Drew Magary from Defector, everybody's favorite crazed Minnesota Vikings fan slash brilliant writer. Drew, I have thrown it out there to Vikings fans who, for some reason, in the middle of the day are online and able to ask you questions that anything is on the table that they want to know from you here today as we have this conversation. So this is the first time we've done a live chat. I'm a little terrified of having you live, but here
You
we
should be.
are.
Yeah, you
Can't
should be.
really be edited. How are you feeling, man?
No filter, baby. I'm fine. That's fine. I'm ready. I'm ready for the week to end. And my children are, and my wife, she's a preschool teacher. They are ready for school to end. They are so like, it's like, when the teachers are like, well, you know what? We don't worry. Let's just watch Hidden Figures for the ninth time this year. It's like when you don't have to learn anything. Everyone's done. Everyone's burnt.
My mom was a reading teacher for a very long time, so understand the feeling. So
Yep.
here's the first question for you. I think it's perfectly apt. Comes from
Okay.
Michael. Michael says, on a scale of 1 to 10, how insanely pumped are you for the upcoming season? So this isn't just regular pumped, Drew. This is insanely pumped. I think
My
that's a great
pu-
place to begin,
Am I pumped and jacked?
right?
Right. I am extremely pumped. I'm pissed that it's only May, right? Because it's like, and I say that as someone who has been watching the NBA playoffs and enjoying them, and is like a reborn, or I don't even know if reborn counts, but a reborn Wolves fan. Like it's been so exciting to watch all the NBA games, but I cannot get to the NFL season fast enough. I'm extremely bullish on the team to the point where I think a lot of us are bullish on the team to the point where I said to you prior to this recording, like, okay, well, why don't I tell you all the things that I'm still worried about so that I don't just spend the entire hour being like, fuck yeah, we're going to win the Super Bowl. That would be bad.
Well, that's kind of how it's gone though for this entire offseason. I have
Right.
found myself wondering, like, shouldn't I be criticizing something just in the name of journalism? But when the plan comes together exactly how I thought it should come together 3 years ago, and now it's time for JJ McCarthy to take over and do the thing that we've all been waiting for a really long time. How many years in a row did we urge them, hey, Kirk's contract's coming up, maybe draft a quarterback? I
Yep.
think going back to like 2020, even when he instead just signed an extension and they thought they could run it all back. And then we did the dance of, how do I do podcasts without bringing up his contract?
Right.
When how also, they would sign somebody in the offseason. It's like, all right, they have brought in Chandon Sullivan. He is a corner from the Steelers. And this offseason, it was like emergency podcast after emergency podcast with so much action and keeping their own star players that it is difficult to punch holes in it. But so if you're doing your 1 to 10 insanely pumped scale, it's a 10, but it also sounds like there is some things that are concerning you. So what is it that's on your mind that's worrisome to you?
So before I get to that, it's not that I'm trying to be fatalist, because I think one thing I have noticed that the confidence that I have, and you would know better than I, but it feels contagious. It feels like it has spread out of the building, and to other fans like me, to the point where like I wrote about McCarthy last week. I think because I had nothing else to write about, or I didn't want to write about anything else because I didn't have a podcast to go on to talk about the Vikings. You like going on your podcast or going on Purple Daily, like you're the only way I can like get Vikings conversation into my life without writing an obnoxious blog about it. So anyway, when people respond to like stuff I've written, about my bullishness, is like, oh, it's so cute how Vikings fans are getting ready to have their hearts ripped out again. And it's like, I'm like I wave it off so easy because it's like, you people do not understand what the fuck is going on with this team right now. Like you don't have a handle on exactly, like, like Caleb Williams was so horny for the Vikings that like his crazy old man went and told Seth Wickersham, we wish we had gotten drafted by these people. This is an organization that knows what it's doing. So if it makes you understand how dumb believing in curses is, how dumb fatalism is. It's, the history of this team is, it's star-crossed, but it's, it's due to some extremely earthbound factors, mostly just bad luck or mismanagement, or, a lack of a durable franchise quarterback since Fran Tarkenton, who, by the way, had to go to New York and then be traded back before he could become the Fran Tarkenton that we all sort of remember, or at least the one that I've read about, because I wasn't alive when Fran Tarkenton was playing, right? And so, now that the ownership, the front office, the coaching staff, and the roster, now that that the organization has its shit together, I know that if they fall short this year or in the coming ones, it won't be because some Nordic witch placed a hex on the team, and it's it'll be because of, again, earthbound reasons, and I'm okay with that. Like that's why I was okay with what happened at the end of last season, because it was wholly explainable. It wasn't a matter of fate. It was their interior is crap, and another team recognized that and took advantage of it, and they had the horses to take advantage of it, and that was it. So that's all far too much setup. I'm supposed to tell you what I'm worried about, right?
Yeah. Well, I just want to say that one thing we had seen, just you can't help but compare it to the past, was there you go. Wow, you really went all in
Yeah.
for this, even with the mug. But in the past, it felt like we would come out of a season and there would be these two or three clear things that took them down within the season, even a good year, like in 2019. It was still the interior offensive line. They were getting a little old in certain spots, things like
Yep.
that. And then you would go to the next season and the problems were exactly the same.
Yep.
And the guard thing, it's not just the guard thing. Like there's been other versions of the guard thing, but guard has been the one that's stood out so much in this conversation. And to have them take this playoff game, identify all of the things that were problematic, and then go and fix them. I know that it seems on like an obvious thing to do for an NFL franchise, but a lot of times when a team wins 14 games, they don't necessarily do stuff like that. And I also think we need to give them credit going back years for winning 13 games and also having the self-awareness to say, we kind of got away with those 13 wins and that wasn't reflective of what this is going to be. So we shouldn't treat it like that. We shouldn't treat it like that result can happen again. And I think it had they franchise tag Sam Darnold and maybe signed one guard and brought in Isaiah Rodgers or something, it would have been running back the same team that could be very competitive, but had the same fatal flaws. And I don't know, by the end of the year, we might have fatal flaws that we didn't anticipate, but
Yeah.
as at least for the approach and the thought process, they resolved the issues that showed themselves in the biggest stage. And I don't know that we've always seen this front office do that.
Yeah. I mean, now it's a matter of execution. The planning has been correct. It's okay. Can they execute off of that plan, right? So, I mean, the thing that I worry about the most, and this should almost be discounted, but it's injury, because injury is essentially what, it can come at anybody at any time. Patrick Mahomes could go down with a torn ACL at any second, right? But where I worry about it is places that I think I should worry about, which is at left tackle with Darisaw, because Darisaw has never really demonstrated that he can stay healthy for an entire season. It's not his fault, of course. It wasn't his fault that someone fell into the back of his leg, right before halftime last season and destroyed his knee. But, I just watched, TJ Hawkinson come back, and he was diminished last season. And, we're all sort of assuming that he'll be back at full capacity this season, but it's not guaranteed. We're all human. Like, and you tear up a knee, that's hard to recover from. So I worry about Darisaw's timeline coming back, even though they have been very bullish about that. And then whether or not, he has a concussion history. And so then I'm hoping for Justin Skol to be like a decent swing tackle, or I guess Brandel, if they make him the swing tackle instead, however training camp happens. And it's very funny because we were talking about guards, and there's a there's a scenario where we end the season with guard as the strongest remaining point on the line because O'Neal is getting a little bit old, and because Darrisaw can get hurt, and then Ryan Kelly has mileage on him too, and the backup center there is as far as I can tell is Michael Juergens, who could suck, right? Like like you say that they believe in him, and that they activated him at certain points last year, but that doesn't particularly mean anything. If I haven't seen the guy, they played Ed Ingram for 3 years and he sucked ass. So I can't count on that being good. So I worry about that. That would be my first thing. The next thing would be, and you'll groan at my bullshit, but it's the cornerback room. And I'm right with you where they felt like they didn't have to dip into the second wave of free agency with Asante Samuel or Mike Hilton or any of those guys, because they said, okay, if we need to, if we need to break glass in case of emergency, we can do that during training camp. We can get to training camp first, and we can really get a full assessment of this backfield before we make any more major moves. Because everything right now is on paper, right? And it looks really good on paper, but you need to see it in action. And you do too, as someone who's going to be at training camp and watching that. So, I want to make sure that those positions are set, because even though I liked Mekhi Blackman his rookie year, he wasn't like mind-blowingly awesome. He was like serviceable, right? And, eventually you might need more than serviceable. And so I worry about that. And then I worry about the bullish on Isaiah Rodgers. Well, okay, can he play a full season? Can Byron Murphy still be as versatile and as good as he is without without Cam Bynum there, and without a veteran hand like Stephon Gilmore on the opposite side? I always kind of like the idea of bringing back Shaq Griffin just in case, because again, serviceable, but I like having serviceable people around. And then the other one is punt returner and wide receiver 3, because I'm still not convinced that a good third wideout option is in the building right now. I like that Ty Felton is tall and fast. I liked watching Rondale Moore his rookie year. Like, he looked very promising his rookie year, but his rookie year was 3 years ago. And then Jalen Naylor is, I think, clearly a guy who's just going to be streaky. Like, he'll make some nice plays, but that's kind of it. There's not going. I don't feel like there's a prime Robert Woods like sitting there on the roster right now. And that to me is, it sounds like sort of champagne problems, right? Like Kwesi says, but those are little things that matter. That it matters. It matters to have every possible receiving option for any quarterback, not just one like JJ McCarthy, who's coming into his first season as a starter.
So I think to go one by one there, with the offensive line, the one thing that they have that most teams in the NFL don't is depth on the offensive line. Now, I don't know what Michael Juergens is going to be either, but there is some signal, at least in the fact that he could beat out a veteran that they signed to be depth, to be active on game day in Dan Feeney, because Feeney had played in the NFL a lot. So if you're coming in as
but Feeney was shitty, so
he was. But the point is just that somebody with that much experience who had played as a starter before, and if you could beat him out, that means the coaches are trusting you if there's an injury more than the guy that they signed purposefully to be a veteran there. It doesn't mean he's going to be a star. There is signal there to tell you, okay, they think that this guy can actually play. That's always going to be a little bit tough with a Ryan Kelly who's had injuries, that you are one play away from having someone who's inexperienced as your starting center. So that is tough. But
because then it's a real problem,
right?
Because
right.
like you said, like if Kelly doesn't work out, they're back to square one at center. Like, Juergens kind of has to work out, otherwise they're boned.
Right, exactly. And there probably will be a couple games where he has to play. Just even in the best case scenario, I'm not expecting 1,100 snaps from Ryan Kelly. But Blake Brandel being a guy that started 17 games, and for a good portion of that was a solid left guard, and then the wheels completely came off later in the season. I don't think there's that many backup left guards who are good enough to start 17 games in the NFL. And then bringing in Justin School for Christian Darrisaw, he proved himself last year with Tampa Bay that he can start over multiple games. Then you're developing Walter Rouse as well, who had a very good training camp. This doesn't solve all problems. Offensive lines get injured. You have to have guys shuffling in and out. But I think of all the positions maybe on the field, that's the one that has the best depth for them. And the secondary and the cornerback group, we spent so much time last year talking about how screwed they were at the cornerback group going into training camp. After Mekhi Blackman went down, oh man, they are in so much trouble now. And then they sign Stephon Gilmore. And again, we think, well, the guy's 100 years old. We'll see. He plays fine. Shaq Griffin plays fine. I'm kind of giving benefit of the doubt there. And also the fact that you can bring somebody else in if it's problematic. And I think the same thing goes for wide receiver, where if they get a look at it and they don't love it, there's other options. And this team, this management has shown you in the middle of the season, every year in the middle of the season, that they're willing to go out and spend their draft capital, that they're just not going to let a problem live there, that they're going to, okay, we don't trust Ty Chandler. We're going to go get Cam Akers, or Christian Darrisaw got hurt. We're going to go get Cam Robinson. I think they'll do that again, that it doesn't have to be done here, but I would like to see first if Isaiah Rodgers is what they think he's going to be, or
Mhm.
how Mekhi Blackman comes back, because I thought Blackman was really good at the end of 2023. And with Rodgers, it seems like Flores is big on him. Now, Flores, sometimes we talk about him as if he has magic powers and could never, ever be wrong. That could happen with Isaiah Rodgers, but I think they have enough time, especially with that position. I mean, the fact that a Stephon Gilmore was there last year, Rasul Douglas is still out there, Shaq Griffin is still out there. It's the weirdest position with free agency, because if you don't get picked up right away, it's almost like no one picks you up until they have injuries or get into training camp. So I'm
That
not
was
saying
the
that those aren't concerns, but it's that I think there are resolutions to those concerns.
I think corner worried me a little less free agent wise, because as a fan, like I see name brand talent out there and I'm like, oh, okay. Like I would like to be able to pick up one of those guys, and we should pick up one of those guys. Whereas I think the group of wide receivers available right now, it's pretty slobby. I'm not really that pleased with it. But going back to corner, I think one of the reasons that I'm hung up on corner is because, and I've texted you about this, but in my lifetime, that position's always been pretty dire for us. Like I would say the best corner of my lifetime was probably Antoine Winfield, who
Mhm.
was not drafted by the Vikings. And then if either number, you can hear me, right? Either either the second best or the guy ahead of him is Xavier Rhodes, but Xavier Rhodes was like prime. Xavier Rhodes was not very long. It was, I think, 4 or 5 years. And then also he had the Ann Edwards thing where like he would go down and you thought, oh shit, he tore his ACL or something like that. And then he'd miss like a series or something, or he'd miss like a quarter and come back. But X did that all the time and it was so annoying. So it was, I think it was when they decided to bring back Byron instead of bringing in DJ Reed, who I just watched DJ Reed shut down Justin Jefferson in London. So I was like, that seems like a guy that I would like to have. So I think that in my mind, there is still a Revis out there. And I know you said the games evolved since then, but it's still my fan brain has a hard time getting past that particular hump.
I think for corner, it's just more important not to have a weak link than it is to have the true shutdown guy. Not that Patrick Surtain doesn't help the Denver Broncos. They would have needed to draft a corner in the first round if they were going to get a talent like that. Because even DJ Reed is a good player, but he's not even really the best corner on his team with the Jets. And, so you're paying a lot of money for that. But I think it's more about if these guys are all solid and do their job. That's what they had last year, that in Flores' defense, you're going to be rallying to make tackles much more than you are going to be locking down one type of guy. And the fact that they play so much zone coverage, I think it allows you to not necessarily need that type of elite player to still thrive. And the fact they were able to keep Murphy with his familiarity with the defense, I think cannot be understated. When he got hurt in 2023, they completely collapsed. So he's
Yeah.
got to be healthy, and he's a main part of that. But I was very much for that signing. Maybe the initial price that was reported that wasn't really even close to the actual price
No,
was
of
a
course
little
not.
bit steep. But then when you saw, oh, okay, that was fake.
Yeah, you got
Uh,
the agent version.
right, exactly. When you see the actual cap hits, you're like, oh, okay, well, I think that's going to be pretty good. But I think that the secondary in general does have questions. I mean, Theo Jackson is someone we've anointed as the next great Andrew Sandejo and the next great Anthony Harris. But we'll see. I've been very impressed by him and very impressed by what the coaches say about him and Harrison Smith. But that's got to happen on
Well,
the actual
he's
field,
looked
right?
good on good in games
Right.
first. Like it's never been like, oh, that guy's a slob. Like when I've seen him on, like, well, get him off the. It's not like you don't get that Ed Ingram reaction, right? So I'm okay. I'm okay with that, and I was okay with them not going in the defensive backfield for the draft because
Mhm.
if they didn't like what they saw or whatever, like I would have liked Jade Barron, but he didn't fall that far, so they couldn't do anything about it. And so, they ended up addressing, sort of a historic craving that us fans have had in getting a guard in Donovan Jackson. So I've been fine with all that. And also you can't have everything. So
Okay, so let me get to some questions here. Feel free to throw some
okay.
more in the chat. This is Ask Drew Magary Vikings questions. So Aaron says favorite quarterback matchup against Brian Flores defense. What is your favorite on the schedule? Quarterback versus Brian Flores.
Does he mean in terms of like a mismatch, or does he mean like a real good match for Brian? Like who?
I'm taking this as like juicy, as in fun, exciting. Can't wait to see it. That's how
uh,
I'm reading this question.
Okay, well that's Burrow in week 3, right? That's like, if we can lock down Joe Burrow, because even when the Bengals can't do dick like last year, Burrow gets his, right? So in order to get where we want to go, you have to be able to minimize the players who one way or another get theirs. That was Rodgers in Green Bay every year, right? It was like they were the guys that you could shut down for like a half, but you kind of knew that, if you let up, they would come get you, right? They were going to get theirs at some point. So a guy like Burrow, that would be someone that I would be very wary of. And then of course Jaden Daniels, because I think the consensus will be that, at least among analytics folks, that team is due for a bit of a regression, and perhaps Daniels too. But you and I saw how he played at the end of last season, and not only was he talented, but he was also unflappable and very smart. And so, you know, that's just his rookie year. That's not with a complete offseason under his belt. So how much smarter will he be, going into the second year? He'll still have the same coordinator, whether or not that's, like Cliff really got a good image rehabilitation last year in Washington. But we all know before that, when he was the head coach in Arizona, he was the guy who you could solve after half a season, guy who, was great with Kyler Murray until defensive coordinators were like, oh, okay, we know what to do now. We know exactly what you're going to do. So, whether or not Cliff has been able to sort of unfuck what's wrong with his brain, that will depend. That will, I assume that will inform how Daniels himself performs, or maybe Daniels will be able to uh, play play well despite that. And Lord knows there are quarterbacks like Aaron Rodgers who have been able to play well despite having substandard offensive minds working behind them.
Well, that's what I was going to say about Jaden Daniels is that he might just be everything proof. There's 5 quarterbacks in the league at any given time that are like this, where Buffalo, their general manager is yelling at my friends on the radio in Buffalo. I don't know if you saw that. And because
No,
they
that sounds like
wanted,
a Buffalo thing.
yeah,
The
they
Buffalo
wanted
guys
to,
are yelly. I know
they
that.
are. Oh yeah, everybody, and just
Yeah,
in the East in general, but
but
especially
like
in the Northeast.
but
Yeah,
I've heard
very
media
yelly.
people talk about Sean McDermott like off the record. Like
Yes.
I've
Yep.
heard
So
stuff.
they defensive, call it defensive.
I would say,
And so he was
but
just went off on them for talking about how they should have drafted a wide receiver. And it's so obvious that they should have drafted a wide receiver, but at
right.
the same time, Josh Allen is just everything proof. And even last year, when they didn't have good wide receivers, he wins the MVP of the entire league and takes them within one Dalton Kincaid of actually catching a floating ball out of the sky
Right.
from beating the Kansas City Chiefs and going to the Super Bowl. I think Daniels might end up being that way. That's not Kyler Murray in Arizona with Cliff Kingsbury, but think about Lamar, where I was never sold on Greg Roman being all that great of a coordinator, and
Yeah.
Lamar just made him into a god. And then they brought in somebody new for Lamar, and he was even better. And I think Jaden Daniels might fall into that category, but now he has a left tackle who's a superstar. He's got whatever's left of Deebo Samuel, which I think is probably something if he's motivated to play. He would be on my list for sure, but for me, it's Lamar Jackson because I haven't seen him in person
Well,
ever in his
these are the
career, which is
guys,
wild.
the three guys we've talked about, Burrow, Jackson, and Daniels. Those are also guys who, it reminds me of RG3, his rookie year, putting a stake in the Vikings in overtime. I think it was overtime, but it was like a 76-yard run. And it was a sort of thing where obviously it sucked to lose the game, but like I couldn't help but admire, right? It's like these are players I like to watch. These are not players like losing to Aaron Rodgers sucks because I hate Aaron Rodgers, right? And I hated him even before he went completely off the reservation. Like I didn't like him, right? But someone like Jaden Daniels, like if he beats our asses, it's gonna be I'll be like, I'll be like, bravo, sir. Well played. You got us this time. I'll be sportsmanlike about it. It's just the quarterbacks I don't like losing to, like Jordan Love. I don't want that to happen.
Well, I felt the same way when like they would play against Drew Brees in a lot of those great battles where you just have to respect Drew Brees' absolute greatness. And they got
Yeah,
him a couple times in the playoffs, but I
because
would
he got
watch and be
his in the
amazed.
miracle game. Like
Yes. Yeah. Right.
let off the gas, and then there he did. He Drew Breesed it, and we needed a goddamn miracle to win it.
The second half quarterback play from Drew Brees is the best I've ever seen in front of me in person. And when you have great, truly great quarterbacks, seeing them in person is different than on TV because you see how hard it really is for what they just did. I think on TV, because of the angle, you'll see drops back and he throws and like, oh, someone caught it. But if you're seeing the whole thing progress in front of you, you can see like how far ahead the guy had to make his decision or just how the tacklers were playing out when he was dodging three of them and running. So you
Well,
can
you
see
and you
like
can
the
keep your
wheels
eye on
turning.
them the whole time too.
Yeah.
Like there's no cutaway. You can see, in continual time, you can see their command over the
Right.
field and over
Right.
their teammates too.
Yeah, and seeing even Burrow in 2021 was amazing to just watch someone throw that accurately in person. That's how it was with Drew Brees, the anticipation, the accuracy, very cool. So this you have to say about this schedule that it has a lot of cool matchups that are going to be on the way, starting with the
Yeah.
quarterback position. Let's get to a question from Bland Toast. Says, what is McCarthy's stat line at the end of the year, Drew?
Oh, I was conservative. Somebody asked me about that on Blue Sky a while back, and I went conservative. I think I went like 3,400 yards, like 25, 26 TDs, and like 9 interceptions. Like there are fans, and I've heard them who are like 4,000 yards, 35 touchdowns, like 5 picks. And that's, it's nice to dream about, but it's not unlike the Darnold expectations from a year ago, right? It's like, okay, if he can play, I'll set my expectation at, okay, he'll be competent and he'll put up numbers uh that won't wow you, but will be good enough for you to have an offense that looks good. I believe in the kid a lot, and I think he'll be very good. But this is the thing where I don't want to get over my skis, and that's not due to fatalism. It's just due to the basic reality of he's not a rookie, but he is a second year quarterback, and not every second year quarterback is Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson. They need time, and particularly in the front end, I firmly believe that the newfound commitment to the running game that we're all anticipating, I assume that Kevin O'Connell himself is kind of only planning for that for the front half of the season, where if he starts to feel like he can really take the governor off of the kid and let him huck it, he's going to do that. That'll be interesting to see. because we already know that McCarthy is excellent at running a primary run offense. And that's not a small thing. Like there are quarterbacks who are bad at that. There are quarterbacks who are bad at executing handoffs and bad at plays. And okay, does he know the right run to audible to at the line? Like we said, like I bitched to you before about, where I hated the, all the Peyton Manning flapping, the line of scrimmage, when there's like 8 guys in the box, you think, oh, it's gonna be a great pass, and then it's it's a run for 1 yard. Like all of that, like I think JJ McCarthy is smarter than that, and I think he knows what to call when he sees stuff. So I'll be interested to see that. Now I'm rambling too much, so I should let you talk.
Well, there is something to running a run first type of offense where you're doing a lot of play action, but you're not ramping up a lot of throws to get in a rhythm. And Kirk Cousins was excellent at this with Gary Kubiak and with Kevin Stefanski. So if they do start out that way, I think that he can build up into that. And
Yeah.
also, like you said, like making checks to the runs and stuff like that. But I think that with Kevin O'Connell, he's always going to lean into the passing game no matter what. Like if it looks like it's even decent, he's like, all right, let's go all in on this.
Yeah.
And I
If the
know,
cheese is there, he's going to eat it.
right. I mean, Josh Dobbs is not a great litmus test because of just how that situation played out with him showing up and they couldn't revamp the entire offense. But
Yeah.
at the same time, he was throwing 35 passes with Josh Dobbs, even on nights where they were running the ball well. So I think he's still going to do that. I was going to bring up Mike Clay's projections because I think what's so great about those, he has many years of data of doing these projections for ESPN, but it also allows you to kind of check yourself. Like, what is someone who has nothing to do with this think who's also really good at projecting stuff? He has JJ McCarthy at 3,700 yards, 26 touchdowns, 14 picks, 39 times sacked, and 200 yards rushing. I think he'll get sacked less than that. Like, that's one of his skills. And I think he'll throw fewer interceptions than that. But I think as far as like a yard wise and touchdown wise, that seems right. And I also feel like they're going to run the ball into the end zone more. That will reduce his touchdown totals.
No, that's a
But
good point. Yeah.
really, it's going to be more of a feel thing, I think, for us and JJ McCarthy than it is just pure statistics, because we're going to look at it and how does he perform within certain moments when they need a drive to put away a team. That there were some previous quarterbacks that did not do that very well. And it seemed like they were always punting away on a 3 and out when they had a chance to put a dagger in a team. Are you going to be able to do that? Like, how does the operation look? How is it in the in-game type of stuff where we did blame Kevin O'Connell for interceptions that happened while you were winning 2 or 3 scores last year, but also someone threw those, and his name was Sam Darnold. And sometimes you'd be like, Sam, why are we throwing into double coverage against the Packers toward the end zone? When, like, there was just a little bit of that I think JJ McCarthy has a great understanding of situational football, the score, what he's got, what the right play is, what they need right in that moment, not just always aggressive. I'm going to try to push it downfield. I think that will help play into it, but it could also reduce his yardage totals and stuff like that.
Yeah, and you want a good, effective short passing game, particularly in the red zone, right? We never really had any touchdowns, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but where there was always able to find TJ Hawkinson in a blank spot, or always able to just get a quick swing pass out to the back, and he just walks into the end zone off an easy play fake. Those sort of easy short passing touchdowns or first downs, those felt like they were at a premium in this offense, and they have felt that way, I think throughout pretty much the entirety of O'Connell's tenure. And I think that obviously O'Connell merits some scrutiny for that, but it's also the tools that he was working with, right? I think that there's another argument that we can have about, I do worry that O'Connell, I know he is an excellent planner of offense, right? But I do worry about whether or not he is actually a great tactician, whether or not he is able to adjust his calls as the game goes on, if he's able to sort of go with the ebb and flows of the game, to call it in a way that's going to maximize the potential that's on the field. There are times when I feel that he's very good at this, But then there's the end of last season where, he got destroyed by Dan Campbell and then by Sean McVay in consecutive weeks. He got thoroughly outcoached. And that's something he's going to have to get better in those moments, and he's going to have to win those coaching matchups for us to get where we're going. And I think that McCarthy maybe will give him an edge in that regard, and I'm sure he feels that way. But all of this is TBD, right? It's all just we can't know until we see them play.
There's certainly something that goes with experience when it comes to the feel for a game. And I think what we don't realize is the guys with the headsets down there, how chaotic it is in the headset. It's
Right.
like being a NASCAR pit crew guy and how much is going on. And I thought the Vikings did an amazing job last year in preseason where they mic'd up O'Connell in the middle of a game and he was talking, but he was also yelling at the referee. He was also listening to the play call and he's like, oh, you're going to like this play call that's coming up. And like, there's so many things happening that I think it does take some time to really hone in. And Andy Reid might be a good example of this early in his career where their offense was great. He was a great coach, but there was just that bit missing of game management, which is super hard when
Yeah.
you're also the play caller. And I think Shanahan messes this up sometimes. McVay messes this stuff up. And there were also times where I felt like just some common sense would go a long way. Just, hey, you're in, and I know I go back to that Green Bay interception, but that was probably one of them that drove me the most crazy. But there was one in London as well. It's 3rd and 13. You're winning the game. Aaron Rodgers is doing absolutely nothing to you. Run a delay handoff, get 4 yards and punt this ball away and you'll be fine. But instead, he throws it down the field, interception. There's like the little things right there. Now, the outcoach in the playoffs to me is a different story. That is a different level of football. It's like there was a great stat that Zach Lowe had the other day about the NBA playoffs and how the Denver Nuggets completely played a different defense against OKC than they had ever played in the regular season. And that's what happens in the playoffs in the NFL. And not to mention, Sean McVay got 2 weeks to prepare for that one. But I think O'Connell does need to understand that you have to throw in a lot of different stuff. You can't just run out what you've done before. It has to look different. There has to be tendency breakers, or you're going to get out coached. Because it seemed like McVay knew everything that was coming there. But let me get.
Yeah, because it
Go
was
ahead. I
the
got another question for you here.
yeah, no, yeah, you can get to the question. It's the, how we always talk about how they always talk about the illusion of complexity, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But if you're going against a coach who can see through that illusion,
yep.
that's a bit of a problem for you. You actually might need a bit of complexity.
Well, and I think that at some points they were predictable. At some points with their first down runs, with certain formations and things like that, and that just doesn't come from me. That's also Bobby Peters, who you might know, did an entire book study of the Vikings offense, and that was one of his takeaways was he could figure out. He's been a coach before, and he writes these X's and O's books, but he could figure out when they were running on first down based on the formation and the personnel every time.
Yeah,
And you
that's
can't have
bad.
stuff like that, right? You can't have stuff like that when you get to the playoffs. If you play Atlanta in week 14, or whatever, it's like, okay, well, they only had a few days to prep for you, but when it's Sean McVay, it's going to be different. Speaking of Sean here says, Drew, do you think there is more to the story relating to Caleb Williams? Seems like his dad is trying to cover or make excuses for his son's bench nap time mid-game and poor play. I have to say real quick, Drew, that of course we made a big deal and Seifert and I did a whole podcast about Williams saying he wanted to be a Viking. The quote that I didn't see until later was him saying no one had showed him how to watch film. That's insane. That
Yeah.
is a huge red flag because I'll just tell you a quick story. My friend Sage Rosenfels, before the Senior Bowl a couple years ago, had Brock Purdy come to his house and go over Shanahan style offenses and watch film with him and stuff. Like, there's former NFL quarterbacks everywhere. You could go to Kurt Warner's YouTube page and learn how to watch film. I mean, that is one of the worst excuses I have ever heard. There's NFL gurus and quarterbacks and former guys you could meet with. That is not an excuse. That reminded me of when Laquan Treadwell said he had never learned how to run routes. And it was like year 3. Like, well, you're not gonna, how are you going to do that now? That to me was crazy. But what was your feeling on that whole story?
Our own Dave McKenna, that defector, he had unearthed some shady stuff that old man Williams had been involved in the past, and I don't mean like creepy stuff. I just mean like grifter like
Yeah.
boring grifter type stuff. And, so when I saw the Wickersham excerpt, like it just struck me as sort of basic stage parenting type quotes, right? Like, you and I know the Marv Marinoviches and the LeVar Balls, but these parents are all over the place. RG3's old man was a lunatic, right? So you can't, these are not necessarily the most reliable sources on these things, right? Like I'm sure that like any sane person would not want to play for the Bears because they suck most of the time. So, I mean, it stood to reason, right? It's a sort of quote that makes sense in your head enough that you take it as gospel, but I can't necessarily trust that old man. And the other thing is that, how many almost happened stories are there in sports history? Infinite, right? So,
Yeah.
he's not here anymore. He's in Chicago. He better figure it out, man.
Okay,
I
let
mean,
me
I kind
throw
of hope.
let
I
me
guess
throw
I
this though. Let me
guess I hope he
toss this
doesn't.
on top of it. Remember, the Chicago Bears were drafting number 1, but that wasn't even their draft pick. They were not that bad of a team the year before. You know who
No.
was that bad? The Patriots.
Yeah.
The Commanders. You want to talk about a team with a bad history? How about bad facilities, previously bad coaching, bad ownership, bad everything? You didn't hear a word from Jaden Daniels, and I'm sure that it was said to his friends like, "Oh boy, Commanders. Okay, yeah, let's see how it goes." Or Drake May. Can they get Randy Moss in his prime back for me? Because right now there's no receivers here. I'm sure that those guys were preferring to throw to Justin Jefferson
Of
and play
course.
for the Vikings.
I mean, everyone's
But
got their dream,
but you never heard this come out, and they had worse, much, much worse situations than Caleb Williams. This sounds like a lot of, and I know that I don't know when these interviews were done, but almost setting up to pre-make excuses before it even went sideways, because the Chicago team was talked about last year as a good situation for a quarterback. And
Yeah.
it's a little like hot dog soup meme guy. Like, if we could only find the person responsible for you guys winning 5 games. It wasn't Mike Tomczak in the history of quarterbacks for the Bears. It's you, man, getting sacked 68 times. I don't know. All this stuff, this excuse making makes me, not that I'm concerned for the Bears necessarily, but if I were there, I would be saying, I don't know, guys. This sounds pretty rough.
Yeah. I think, I'm almost like I tend to overcorrect based on, uh, not wanting to be too boomery about stuff like this,
Yep.
right? Like,
Yep.
because I was there for, Cam Newton getting, dragged for wanting to be an entertainer and an icon. And, I don't know, and every other number of athletes who, it's like, oh, it's all about him, or, and these are never white athletes, of course, right? So like, I always sort of want to make sure I check myself on that. But, when people are talking about how poor Williams's body language has been, not just in Chicago, but back when he was at USC, it was correct. It
Mhm.
was like, if he's not, like, the quarterback, you have to be this bland, stone-faced dude on the sidelines. And, if you're Tom Brady, you can go LFG like a dork, right? And get the troops fired up that way. But you can't really, you know, as your mood goes, so goes the mood of the offense and also the team itself, right? So if you're sitting there, the towel around your head, and you're doing the, you know, you're not making the surrender cobra, but you're pretty much there, then everyone else is going to follow suit. And you can't really do that. You have to be the carnival barker a little bit. And, I want to assume that Ben Johnson will, that sort of thing is correctable. I do. I don't think it's like some sort of moral failing. I don't think it's like, oh, Caleb Williams is a bad kid or whatever. It's just, you know, he is such a talented quarterback that, if he goes to USC and his line is absolute dog shit, and his defense collapses at the end of the season, and you see him like being really pissy on the sidelines, you're like, yeah, I'd be pissed too if I were that guy. Like, everyone's doing wrong by him. But then there's the other side of the equation. Is that, you're the quarterback. You have to do right by your team. So, and that becomes especially true in the NFL. You can't just wild away to, especially now, you can't blame it on your head coach, because He doesn't have Lincoln Riley to blame anymore. He doesn't have Matt Eberflus to blame anymore. And maybe Ben Johnson's a slob, but he deserves the benefit of the doubt. And so, my judgment on Caleb Williams is that I still think that there is the potential there. I think that he was still drafted number one for a reason. Like it's very fun to do the redrafts where, Daniels and May get picked before him, but nobody was doing that before that actual draft. Everyone was like, Caleb Williams is the guy. And, obviously you're going way too far when you're saying he's the next Mahomes, but it's almost like you can't help it because it's so much fun to think about. Right. But, then the draft happens and then reality sets in. And, whether or not that reality is, something that Williams is, forced to grasp or is taught to grasp is still very much up for debate. But, I'd like to think he can, not while he's playing against us. Like, I hope he sucks against us, but in the other 14 games, sure, I hope he's okay.
Well, I just think that he's come across sort of entitled and soft and coddled and all those sorts of things that make it very difficult for you in the NFL because there's so much scrutiny and it just doesn't stop for you. It's not like, oh man, we had that really tough game against Washington that emotionally broke me, but Toledo's coming up. It's like, no, if you look at the Vikings schedule, it's like, oh, well, you follow up Baltimore with the Lions and then the Commanders, right? I mean, these teams that are great. It doesn't work that way. And you just wonder, is he going to be able to handle the beatdown that it is the NFL? Because last year he didn't. And
No.
I think when you see guys give up, that's always concerning to me. And I never saw Drake May give up. And that team was so bad. That
Awful.
team was comically bad. And they had a coach who had never done it before and had no clue and thought it was a good strategy to call his team soft in like the third day. And Drake May just kept fighting and they lost some games real terrible. And then the next week he was all right. And I just didn't see that from Caleb because I think he had the ability in that season to grab it by the reins and say, we're not going to fall apart here. And he was also standing there, not calling a timeout on Thanksgiving Day, trying to change a play. And then, his coach rightfully gets embarrassed for that and fired. But what gets forgotten because Eberflus got fired is that the quarterback is allowed to make a tee with his hands as well. And I thought that he got worse and worse and worse as the season went along, as the league beat him down. So can someone fundamentally get mentally tougher? I guess we're going to find out as he matures, but all the talent in the universe, I just think, is he also going to evaluate himself and say, I've got to see the field better. I've got to hang in the pocket better. I've got to do these things. Because if you've been told forever that the way you play is perfect and flawless, and then you get to the NFL and it's not, and you're supposed to play differently, can you actually do that? We saw that from other quarterbacks, but I don't know if we're going to see it from him or not.
I think it's possible. I think that Geno Smith might have been branded a bit of a malcontent when he was in New York. And, obviously the broken jaw incident is, kind of what defines that. But I do think that, I think that in the case of like Anthony Richardson pulling himself out of a game, that's kind of a deal breaker, right? But guys who otherwise are extremely talented, but but they're so young, they just quite don't get the hang of how to be a professional yet. I'm willing to cut those guys some slack to see what happens. I think it's possible.
That's where I'm at is we're going to find out rather than I'm trying to, because I'm not trying to get on TV. If I was trying to get on TV, then I would call it right now.
He's no Shedeur Sanders, I'll tell you what.
But that is another thing though, that some of this stuff is real and you have to be allowed to say it too when it is real. Skywalking McCarthy says, is it bad that I have the same feeling as after 2017, where the narrative was we're a quarterback away? I feel it will be an 8-9 season. It sounds like Skywalking McCarthy is worried about the similar regression that we've seen coming off of great seasons in the past.
Yeah, but it's apples and oranges. You're just using the past to predict the future for no reason other than just, I'm ready to be hurt again. And that's not, I think you have to look at it a bit more objectively. I think that's where the confidence comes from. from the fans and even the local media about this team is that, this is not, this is not a paper tiger of a roster that was always just one piece away. Quite the opposite. It's a very, very, very talented roster, very deep, one that is not just a QB away, one that just won 14 games with Sam Darnold at the helm. So it is, plug and play is way too overused of a term, and it's always incorrect. But it's the sort of thing where, I don't think there are many Vikings fans out there who watched last year's team and said, you know what? The only thing we need is a quarterback. No one said that. They said, okay, we need guards. We need a center. We need defensive tackles who can get to the passer. And then after that, let's get our rookie QB to see if he can become, sort of the quarterback who can cover over flaws the way that Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson and the big guys can. But I don't have that. I think if you're just sitting like, oh, well, is it wrong that I have the same bad feeling as, X time the Vikings fucked up? Well, you're using history as a crutch, and for no real reason. You're just making yourself miserable for reasons that you don't need to. Like I want to make sure that I had so much fun last season taking every game as it comes, and I plan on doing that exact thing again, even though I'm insanely bullish on the team this year. I want to stay just in a week-to-week mode and go with the flow.
So I'll defend Skywalking McCarthy here, though, because it's not just the Minnesota Vikings who have a remarkable history of going to the NFC Championship or winning double-digit games and then falling off. It's also everyone in the NFL who doesn't have one of the best quarterbacks in the league or proven to have one of the best quarterbacks in the league. This is life in the NFL on purpose, designed this way for everyone to be rising and falling, and every fan base. You're not the Pittsburgh Pirates or the Colorado Rockies where you go into a season knowing you'll never win.
Right.
This is where everyone believes they have a chance on day one. And there are some things that could be regression-y. One of them is that they were healthy last year. Another thing is the schedule last year. I mean, I think as we go through the schedule, there's no doubt about how hard it projects to be. And you could run into more pitfalls. And also there's this major factor of not knowing how the quarterback is going to play. So those things are much more glaring than maybe they would be if you were the Ravens and Lamar Jackson, where you walk into the season starting the conversation at 11 wins. And then will it be 11 or 15? Like, let's find out. It could be less than that if some of those boxes end up getting checked. Now, talking yourself into that at this moment on May 16th is not something I would do. Like,
no,
let's let one wrong thing happen first, and then we'll start to get there.
Well, the other thing is that I still feel like after 2017, when they brought in Kirk, I still feel like the Vikings minus Mike Zimmer were kind of the only people in Minnesota who thought Kirk Cousins was the Super Bowl guarantee. Like, I don't remember, like, when that signing happened, I was like, yeah, that seems like a pretty decent option. But I wasn't like I live in Washington. I know Kirk Cousins. Like, I wasn't like, oh yeah, it's a lock now for sure. No doubt about it. Like that I didn't get that sense from other fans either. I didn't feel like there was a whole lot of chestiness going on, bringing in a dude who had never won dick, like he, I don't quite see reality lining up for our man, but I do appreciate the question.
Well, I'm trying to find out what the over-under win totals were for 2018 to get an objective look at that.
Like 10?
Did people think that the Vikings were going to be that good? I think it was 10. Yeah, the over-under for 2018 was 10.
Well, that's the other thing. Who was picking us to win the Super Bowl that year? Like, do you remember? Like, was there like do you how look, when we get to August, right? And like the ESPN staff like put out all their predictions for the season, it's all gonna be like Philly, Philly, KC, Baltimore, Philly, maybe Buffalo. Like maybe somebody gets a little crazy and like puts the Packers there because someone always wants to put the Packers in there. But like that wasn't there was not some overwhelming, sentiment that the Vikings were like they're a juggernaut now, like league wide before 2018. That was not the case at all.
I think they were definitely in the conversation. And now remembering, as I looked at the rest of the league for that same discussion, there were only 3 or 4 teams that were above 10 because it was a 16 game season. So we have to adjust for that.
Yeah.
I think that they had pushed themselves into the discussion, but I don't remember people putting them as the favorite to win the Super Bowl. I agree.
No.
But this is really the last time since then that I think expectations were that high. Let me get you a couple of kind of fun questions for you. You did not tell me how much time you have, by the way, so I don't know how long we're doing this.
No, we'll do a few minutes. I will say though, one more thing is that I think that there is a marked difference between expectations and excitement. I think everyone is extremely excited for this season.
Yeah.
Right. But I don't know how many fans, like you'll get a few bold fans out there who would be like, we're winning the Super Bowl this year. Like, I think it's just like everyone's excited for the potential start of something good, but that something good is not merely this year. Like, we're all looking forward to kind of an era here. And, we all hope that there's a Super Bowl win somewhere within it, but not, it could be at any time, but it's just, we are excited to see. It's an excitement. It's not a, oh, I'm going on my take here and, doing the coward thing by, braying like a donkey about, this is going to happen or that's going to happen. That's not the sensation I feel right now.
Okay. Rapid fire with a couple of these. Hunter says, how many F-bombs do you average per game when watching the Vikings?
Fuck, Hunter. I mean, it kind of depends on the game, doesn't it? Right? Like, although, like, okay, so like I have happy F-bombs, right? And then I have sad F-bombs, and then I have ref F-bombs, and I have coach F-bombs. I rarely have coach F-bombs these days with O'Connell, but let's go with 50.
Yeah, I was thinking the number's pretty high.
I'll say 50. And also, like, we count motherfucker, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay, because I say that quite a bit.
Okay. Ben wants to know, which broadcast crews do you want and which don't you want for I assume you mean for the Vikings this upcoming season. Is there anyone in particular that you find annoying or aggravating?
Yeah, I'm on the record as a lifelong Schlereth hater. Cannot stand him. He is absolutely god awful. Just the worst. And then also, and I think everyone else knows this too, when you get the Vilma game, when you get Kenny Albert and Jonathan Vilma, like Kenny Albert's fine. Like, he's not his old man, but whatever. But Vilma is like, it's so disarming to me because he was a cool player. Like, he was at the U, and then he was the Saints and the Jets. He was a cool player. And he is like the boringest, blandest, shittiest color guy. Like, I think color guys in general have gotten better, but like, and I know Tom Brady is a hilarious exception to that for very Tom Brady reasons. But in general, when I get, I'm the sort of guy that like even likes like Troy Aikman. Like, there are a lot of people who hate Troy Aikman, but I'm like, yeah, he's fine, whatever. I don't care. You have to work hard to really get on my nerves, and Schlereth and Vilma are those guys. And then also for play-by-play guys, I'm pretty cool with all of them, but I'm also on the record as being very underwhelmed by Mike Tirico, even though he's very prepared, very on point. There's no person there. I think the best I ever got from Tirico was the Sam Hubbard return in the playoff game, Ravens Bengals, when he really got like his voice cracked, and that was fun. And then there was another time last year. It wasn't a Vikings game, but it was one of those. It was a team mismanaging the clock. They weren't taking timeouts or whatever. And Tirico goes, "Time's running down. No one knows what they're doing." And it was very house mom. It was very cute in that regard. But it doesn't feel like an event when I get Tirico. So he's the guy that of all the national ones, I'm the most lukewarm on.
I think just in general, that over time, these broadcasts have all been sort of smoothed out to be very close to each other. And there's not too many that really pop as being sometimes when I watch old games, the broadcast is so comically bad that it's almost fun. And that just doesn't happen anymore.
In fact, I was going to take you to task because you did Let's Remember Mike Patrick post. and you were kind of nice about the Patrick Theismann McGuire booth, and I hated that booth
Oh, that's funny because
so much.
I don't agree. I love that booth.
Oh,
I enjoyed that booth.
oh, the war. Paul McGuire was the dumbest, loudest
Oh
asshole, and like,
man, wow.
and Theismann's just a talking haircut. He sucks. I live here. I know how shitty he is. He's just so bad, and like his voice is annoying. I hated it. Oh, and like Mike Patrick was sort of like a victim of circumstance there. Like if he did a college game, it was okay, so long as like he wasn't asking Todd Blackledge about Britney Spears. But like other, otherwise, like otherwise that booth, I dreaded that booth with all my heart and
Man, we
soul.
just we see it totally differently. I loved McGuire's outbursts, and he used to talk about the line play all the time.
You talk about tough. This guy is
I love
tough.
that. I love that. I was also maybe 12.
Oh, all right, all right.
Okay,
All right.
so well, and I'm from Buffalo. Paul McGuire's from Buffalo. He's like a
Oh,
legend there. So
Baffle.
yep.
You saw him at the
Uh,
bar.
yeah, I don't know if they talk like that, but Alex says, "Where is the letdown game this season?"
If I knew, would it be a letdown?
Ooh,
Right? I mean, it'll be like a loss to Chicago, or it's always the game you think like, oh, they're gonna win. The most obvious dangerous game is, and you've talked about this, is that short trip to LA to play the
yep,
Chargers. Because it's like, the Chargers were, well, I mean, I don't know what their Vegas win total was before last season, but it wasn't 11. Like they won 11 games, right? No one thought that roster would win 11 games, and of course Harbaugh'd them to 11 wins despite having a barren roster, and so they're going to be good even if they don't have a good roster. And you're going to have to go play them on a short week in LA, and you're going to have to deal with Justin Herbert, and you're going to have to do them after, and you have to do that after playing Philly, who's going to beat the shit out of you. So, I remember when we went to play the Rams on the short week after the Detroit loss, it was like the Rams were 1-3. They hadn't gotten their shit together. So it was like, oh, we're just going to run them over. And that didn't happen. Right. So I think that the letdown game is always dictated to some degree by recency bias. Who looks really bad early in the season, and how good did we look the week before, or how close did we come to beating a big boy team or something like that. And that's always the confluence of circumstances that allows you to be shocked and appalled when you drop a game to Caleb Williams, even though he's thrown 3 picks, or you lose to Cleveland in London, right? Like I think like that Steelers game in Dublin, that's not an easy game. I know that we were talking about, oh, okay, well, they don't have to go to not Heinz Field anymore to face the hometown crowd, but still the Pittsburgh Steelers. And, Mike Tomlin's still going to have them, running at 5,000 miles an hour at the quarterback. And, that's going to be a tough game. So it's the NFL. They're all potential letdown games when you think about it, but it's always going to be dictated by how you're feeling about both the Vikings going into that game, and then about their opponents, sort of the last time you saw them. So if the Chargers look like absolute dog shit before we play them, and we somehow like manage to beat the mighty Eagles, then you better be on high alert. You better be on high upset alert going into that week.
I was thinking the late season Giants just feels like a overlook the Giants. They're mediocre to bad, and then
No, they're
just
so
they're
shitty.
they're going to be so bad. Yeah, probably. But that's
they're
why it's a
so
letdown. There's not that many letdowns on the schedule in general. So if you're picking one, from a timing perspective, I have this live read here from our friends at Multitude,
okay.
who work with both of our podcasts, and then maybe a couple more. Is that good with you?
Yeah, let's do 2 more.
Okay. All right. But I do need to tell everyone that we've got a sponsor on the show, Tempo Meals, that is helping me avoid my addiction to fast food, a weekly delivery service that has chef-crafted meals from a dietitian-approved menu that brings it fresh to your door. Perfectly portioned lunches and dinners take all the guesswork out of eating. They're fully prepared, so you get them, you put them in the microwave, 3 minutes later, you are eating. I got another box the other day. Delicious Korean beef quesadilla, absolutely fantastic. But dozens and dozens and dozens of options for you for whatever your preferences may be. So for a limited time, Tempo is offering my listeners 60% off their first box. Go to tempomeals.com/purple insider for that. Tempomeals.com/purple insider for 60% off your first box. Rules and restrictions may apply. So here's one from Nick. It says better all-time Vikings position group, wide receiver or defensive end.
Let's talk this out because my reflexive answer is wide receiver because my first favorite Viking was Anthony Carter, right? And the procession really hasn't stopped since then. Anthony Carter, Chris Carter, Jake Reed, Randy Moss, Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. Like that's really impressive. And so when I go back to end, okay, well, I started off really strong. That was Al Noga, Keith Millard. They were excellent. I'm bad about the 60s and 70s, right? Because I wasn't sentient then, right?
Right.
So then we got Everson Griffin, we got Jared Allen. We got,
Carl Eller is one of the best players in football history in general.
Yeah.
So he has to be in the discussion there.
So, but also Ahmad Rashad was a great Vikings receiver and then not a very good television host after that. I'm inclined to say wide receiver, but I feel like that is because of my age. What do you think?
I think wide receiver is probably the answer here because if you even just went by decade and said, all right, receivers of the 70s, you're getting to Ahmad Rashad pretty quick. I think that's right. Or when did his career span?
He played in the 1970s.
Yeah, I think he was like an all-decade player or something in the 70s, wasn't he? I mean, he was really, really good in the 70s, so he would get in that conversation. But if you're doing a Mount Rushmore of Vikings receivers, he's not even talked about. And he was one of the best receivers of his decade. And the same thing goes for Anthony Carter. If you just did best receivers of the 80s and then into the very early 90s, Anthony Carter's name is coming up fairly soon. Those guys aren't anywhere close to the top two.
No.
They might have two of the top 10 receivers ever. I think Randy Moss has a case for number 2 overall, number 3 overall in the history of the sport. That as great as it is, Eller, of course, it gets up there, and as great as it is to have a Hall of Famer in Dolman, a Hall of Famer in Jared Allen.
Oh my God, I didn't mention Dolman.
I don't think that Dolman, he was fantastic.
I know Dolman he was awesome.
Allen,
I love him.
But I don't think they get into the realm of in their position group historically of Chris Carter and Randy Moss.
Well, also you can make an argument that the Vikings have the best wide receiver history of any franchise.
Yes.
Maybe outside like San Francisco, right? Or Pittsburgh, right?
Pittsburgh, I think, is number 2. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I would say wide out. And you know what? That's been the joy of cheering for this team my entire life, where it's like, okay, they haven't won a Super Bowl, but the number of cool players I have gotten to watch have made the Vikings well worth the price of admission. It's not like I had to be a Titans fan and watch them, go 2 yards at a time on their way to going 3-14 every year.
Okay. I think you've answered most of the best questions here. So how about we leave it with this? What question do you have for me? What do you want to ask me?
Oh God. Okay.
What do you got? You usually text these anyway, so I try to mix into the show's questions that you have in general, but what's on your mind?
Do you think the backup quarterback is currently on the roster?
I think it's very realistic that he's not, because Sam Howell, I like
Sam more than you. I know that.
Yeah. He played 1 year. He went 4-13, got sacked 100 million times. My issue with Sam Howell was actually not even really truly what happened in Washington, but sacks always scare me. When guys have 1 million sacks, that's a hard problem to fix. It was actually, for me, what he looked like in the game against the Packers, because as a connoisseur of backup quarterbacks in my life, one of the great signs of an all-time journeyman, someone that you love and you could trust, a Josh McCown, is when they have to be thrown into a situation out of nowhere and they look prepared and oh my gosh, he came off the bench. I mentioned Sage Rosenfels. He had a game where he was down 20 points when he played for the Dolphins to Buffalo, came into the game, came back and won it in the middle of the game when Gus Frerotte got hurt, because of course Gus Frerotte. But Gus was that kind of guy. Like, oh, he could come in and just be prepared. It looked like Howell wasn't really ready to play that night. And I think that's a concerning sign for him. I think Brett Rippon is liked by the team, but I don't know if they want to trust him.
No, I get Sean Mannion vibes from Brett Rippon. I'm
Yeah,
not
I
I'm
think
not
the
down with
same
that.
sort of Nick Mullins kind of like if they absolutely have to, he can run the offense, but
Right. Well,
probably
Mullins
not.
is fun. Like I liked
Yeah.
watching
Yep.
Mullins play, even when he was throwing picks. Brett Rippon, if he's out there, it might be like, oh, maybe I should work some Sunday ticket into to
Right.
what I'm
Right.
watching right now.
So I do think that there is a very realistic chance that they get Sam Howell in. They don't love how he's learning the offense and how he's grasping it all. And then they just say, we've got to go get someone else. And there's always some quarterback battle that a journeyman is losing elsewhere to
Yeah.
a younger player. And I'll just toss out there that Max Brosmer looked good at rookie minicamp, and that means everything. And we should break it down in 100 different ways. But you never know, Max
You
Brosmer.
you never know.
You
That's
never
the
know.
fun, baby.
That's right. Drew Magary, this was a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed answering great questions from Vikings fans. I appreciate everybody who jumped in randomly in the middle of the day to ask Drew great questions. So thank you, sir, for your time.
Thanks
And
for having me on, brother man.
we'll see you soon.
See ya. Bye.
All right. And thank you, everybody, for watching / listening. And we'll catch y'all later. Football